This machine is called the bandsaw. The bandsaw gets its name from, there's a band of metal that has saw teeth on it that rotate around an upper wheel and a lower wheel that rotate clockwise and eventually go through the table, and it's a little bit exposed here and it cuts through wood. So the use of the bandsaw is to cut material apart. That would be the use. Now, a few safety rules that come in line with the bandsaw. I have a few of those in my room, and safety rules apply to both of them. First, this machine can make all three types of cuts that you will be doing in my classroom. It can make miter cuts, it can make rip cuts, and it can also make cross cuts. There's a few other features that come in line with that kind of help you do all those cuts. There's miter gauges, and there's also a rip fence as well. Now, a few other safety rules that come in line with this machine. First, no curves or tight angle cuts. Those types of cuts will bend the blade and eventually would make it bend and possibly snap and shoot out to the right. Also, it's not a good idea to stand to the right-hand side of the bandsaw, because if the blade does in fact snap, it can possibly come shooting out in that direction. Another safety rule would be to keep your hands away from the cut line. Now, the cut line is an imaginary line that starts at the very front of the blade where the teeth are, and it comes straight back towards you. So when you're cutting, keep your hands free of that area. They should never be in front. They should always be on either the left or the right side to make sure that you're safe the whole entire time. It's also not acceptable to do any back cuts of any type, and a back cut is basically when you're cutting into the wood like this, and you realize, oh shoot, you made a mistake and you have to pull back. That's known as a back cut. The reason why we don't do a back cut is because if you pull backwards, there's a possibility that you might bend or twist the blade. It could pop off the wheels, or could even break and shoot out to the right, and that just wouldn't be good overall. If you ever have any situations where you have to put your hands close to the blade, it's a good idea, or cutting small pieces, it's a good idea to use this thing here called a push stick. And it just allows you to push the piece of wood through safely without your hands getting in harm's way. So a push stick is only used to push the piece of wood through. The last safety rule is after you're done using the machine, you turn it off and you stand and you wait with the machine until it stops completely. Now, you don't do anything to slow it down like you would some of the other machines in my room. You let the blade slow down by itself. Common mistakes I've seen in the past, people take a scrap piece of wood or even a push stick, jam it into the blade, and that is actually, in the past we've had situations where students have done that and the blade has indeed snapped. So never slow it down with a scrap piece of wood. Let it slow down before you walk away from it by itself. Let it slow down by itself. Now, there's a few features I want you to be familiar with when you're using my saw. First, the on and off button. Depending on where it is, usually there's an on and an off button. You press the on button to start the machine up, and when you're finished, you press the off button to slow it down. The next adjustment you might find on a bandsaw is something called a blade guard. And a blade guard or a safety guard is something that's in place to keep you safe from a moving part on the machine. And the bandsaw is a perfect example of where we can use or find a safety guard. So the safety guard itself, you can actually adjust the height of the safety guard with a few different knobs. On this machine here, there's a knob on the very back of the machine that you loosen up. It's like a little jam knob. And then there's a knob right here, like a turn handle, that when you turn it away from yourself, it lowers the guard, so there's a little bit of the blade exposed. You turn it in the opposite direction, counterclockwise, it exposes more of the blade. But the general rule of thumb is you want as little as this blade exposed as possible. That way we minimize the risk of you getting your hand accidentally going into that machine or the blade itself. So set it to a distance where it's about 1 finger distance above the piece of wood. You want to have it set so the blade guard or the bottom of these bearings are about 1 finger's distance above the piece of wood. The last feature I'm going to be showing you on this machine is something that we will be using more in 7th and 8th grade. It's called a rip fence. And a rip fence is like an adjustable guide that allows you to keep a nice even straight cut every single time you pass a piece of wood through. Now, when you're using the rip fence, please make sure you're adjusting it with the machine off. And if you're making adjustments, I would prefer, even if you drew some lines on your board, use the ruler that's connected to measure the distance between the fence and the blade itself. Once you're happy with where the fence is located, you take the handle, and sometimes there might be even a turn knob, you push it down to secure it and lock it in place. And then when you're running your piece of wood through, keep it against the fence You're going to use your left hand to push through, and your right hand's just going to act like a guide, pushing down against the table and against the fence. And it's a good idea to have a partner to catch the piece of wood on the other side. We only use the fence for making rip cuts, which goes in line with the wood grain, as you can see. This is a perfect example of the wood grain itself.